However, there was a scenario that happened, and this is really where you get that great battle that's often talked about. Like the Bible says, a great battle in heaven with the angels and the demons. There's in most texts something about a great battle between gods. And there's generally, sometimes they say the Suras and the Huras or the Devas, etc. But what this was about is that, so as you can even see today, the planet has played host to quite a few different types of beings, right? With different levels of reflection, right? And even right now, this planet is really being dominated by a specific kind of reflection. And we won't really get into that more so right now than just highlighting that. So it turns out that two elements, for instance, like fire and air, right, like reside. So when you look at water and earth as elements, right, they're on the bottom, right? Like water, you pour it, it immediately goes down and fills up the whole ocean, right? And then you look at earth, right? There's water in the air, of course, mist, but it wants to go, like it can go down, right? It'll seep all the way through the cracks, go down. Earth is like that same way, okay? But when you start talking about air and you talk about fire, these have a tendency to reside within this and higher, right? The gases and things also correspond to this. So when you can see them as energies and even emotions, they're actually really opposite to each other. So in many ways, if you're dealing with an air and a fire being as a predominantly earth and water being, it's going to get pretty conflicted, right? Because this is a combustive reality. Like it brings new things through conflict, or what we would just call yin and yang, I Ching, okay? And so in this, my point that I'm trying to make is that, so we had these beings called, they were giving them the term the Devas. Some of these terms have been mixed up, but we'll just call them the Celestials, okay? And there's always this thing that if a being is up high, then it's pure and it's kind and it's happy and it wants to love us. And nothing could be further from the truth in respect to all of the archetypes have their positive and the negative side, or what we call seasons, okay? And even the word hour, which is the root word to horror, the word hour meant the designation of the seasons. It had nothing to do with like there was no 24 hours. There was only 4 hours. Now, remember what I was talking about with how 4 divides into the 7 days of the week. So there were only 4 hours or 4 seasons or 4 kind of like temperaments of the elements. That's what the seasons are. But depending on how you caught an element and what temperament it was in will be like how it acted, okay? So when we would come up against these forces in nature, this is why you had shamans, because shamans were engaged in the art of appeasing these forces during different times of the year and even charming them to do different things. And this is no different than even like a farmer or somebody who knows how to work with the land and bring in different trees and put up canopies and plant bamboo and to get a different type of environment. So you can say that true magic was the ability to be able to manipulate the environment around you so that it will always be pleasing and be like a paradise for you and your people, okay? But the Celestials, if you may, fire and water, they had still temperaments that were somewhat hostile to the beings that were predominantly earth and water. And also when you look at many African traditions, it's very clear that they're very water orientated and earth orientated. Of course, you got fire gods and thunder gods and things like that, but you see a lot with the grounding and the depth, okay? And so it got to a stage where the Celestials, because to be celestial and to tap into that side of self gives one access to what you would perceive as the future. And so if you know the future, you know how to create things from the future and bring them into the now and even have an advantage. And it got to a level that the Celestials had such a you can say, I wouldn't call it unfair, but the earth had become imbalanced because the celestials were so much more powerful than what you would say is your terrestrials or your daemons. Okay, so the celestials got more powerful than the daemons, and it started causing an extreme imbalance in that churning of the center, which has to always be done in balance, right? So the higher levels is only concerned about balance. You got celestials that do have more power, bringing in more of their technologies and things that are making the terrestrials like more and more inferior. The terrestrials are bowing down to the celestials. Do you start seeing this in some of the spiritual traditions, or almost all of them? They're afraid of them and their powers. Like if you could use thunder at all, you could see how you could back down a whole army. Thunder is extremely powerful. So if a person can control thunder, you see what I mean, as a being, you know what I mean? It's like, this is a formidable foe in that way. So in every way, it needed to be balanced. And so what happened, and this is still recorded in the annals, was a being named Shukra, which now today is known as the planet Venus, arrived onto the planet as a guru, if you may, or a teacher to the daemons, or the people who were fleshly. These are like dwarves, small people, earthly people that are a part of the earth. They're created from the earth, right? And these are predominantly the dwarves and the pygmies and the nagas. Taught them you could sometimes say it's a celestial knowledge, but we're talking about it. It taught them not only the power of the stars, like we're explaining to you today, but it talked about this being basically bought all of the knowledge of all the correspondences of the celestial heavens, which are the body. Okay. So in this school of teaching, Shukra bought the knowledge of all the correspondences and pieces in the game, if you may, and the archetypes of the stuff that everything is made up on Earth, to level the playing field between the daemons and the celestials. And in this case, the daemon is a carbon-based life form. It's like a diamond is a daemon, right? That's why the words are the same. It's 666, which is a carbon-based life form. So when you're looking at this, you're seeing the gods had technically gotten to a level where they were using, as still goes on in occultism, the daemons, or the physical beings, including the animals, as slaves and subordinates. And this was causing an imbalance within all there is. And so to level the playing field, the knowledge, instead of keeping the daemons ignorant of who they were, the knowledge was given to them through Shukra. And then from that point, and this entity is mentioned, nowadays it gets like, Venus is Lucifer now. But the specific makeup of this being is predominantly feminine. It is also, and I'm just going to show some images here, it is predominantly, let me just go to my images here just so we can kind of like not make this like so mysterious where people don't get it, right?
Right.
So, when you go to ancient Lanka in South India, because this is where some of their temples still stand, and they haven't done too much defacing on those temples, so that you could, some people have gone back and pointed out that the people that are on these sculptures, one, have elongated skulls. Also, you can see they have breasts. They're more reptoid because they have those two holes like lizards have in the side of their heads. And that these beings have a tendency to be androgynous. Okay? Like most of them are androgynous. That's even the story of the Nomo, that if you're not androgynous as a Nomo, it's a mistake. They try to produce self-generating androgynous beings. And in this case, Shukra was a self-generating androgynous Lemurian, and it also generated its son. And this became like the motif of the Black Madonna, if you may, or Venus, also Yamaya, the water goddess, holding her son, which was basically brought forth by her. Because when you think about Ma'at and math, there's absolutely no way this gets kicked off unless even beings in the same family are actually populating with each other. More importantly, the mother would have to populate with the son to create the first ones. Do you see what I mean? So these deep mysteries later on became the Messiah. So for the record, the first Messiah was more of a female. And the reason why it was a Messiah is that it brought this knowledge, and this knowledge allowed us to understand everything about us, and also to be able to activate the powers of the celestials, if you may, or the stars, in order for us to basically have an equal footing with these beings. So that's where the knowledge of even what you're calling astrology, astronomy, even the new systems, gene keys. Of course, we have genealogy, the Enneagram, anything with heptagrams. So this stuff is not just geometry and numbers. It's also personalities, and it's also archetypes and elements and nobles. And so just like you see behind me, there's a periodic table up there.